India is the third largest automobile market globally, contributing a remarkable 7.1% to our nation's GDP. As we navigate the future of the automobile and mobility industry, let us deep dive into discussions on electric vehicles, passenger and commercial vehicles, ancillaries and infrastructure, policy and regulations. Industry pioneers and thought leaders will unite to explore the future at the second edition of Republic Digital Roundtable Mobility Revolution, pioneering the next auto era. Only on Republic Digital.
And the topic of our new panel is Ancillaries and Infrastructure, where we will talk about how robust infrastructure and innovative ancillary services are critical for a sustainable future in mobility, especially when it comes to electric vehicles. So I have with me today on the roundtable Vaibhav Kaushik, who's the co-founder and CEO of Naugati. I have Himanshu Singh Raghuvanshi, who's the founder and COO of CapGrid. I have Venkata Saivi Reddy, co-founder of Lion Charge, and Pranay Kumar, Executive Director at REPL. So let me start with you, Pranay. Because you look at town planning, infrastructure, where do you think India stands vis-a-vis EV infrastructure? Are we ready? How ready are we?
See, we have as on date over 12,000 odd charging facilities, and we need 30 lakhs.
12,000 and we need 30 lakhs.
Yes. Now, how to reach it? That too, we want to do it in very fast time. So there lies the gap.
Right.
In terms of ramping up, yes, over 100% growth is there year on year, which is expected to further go up because EV adoption is pretty fast in country. Newer cities which are going to be planned now, very less number of cities have come in India after independence. Now newer cities are being launched. Those will be planned with these infrastructure. However, the existing infrastructure will have to do retrofitting because neither the grids have been designed nor the cable structures are like that. So there is definitely a gap.
Right. The numbers, I mean, let me start with your numbers and Saivi, you can take it. 12,000, but you need 30 lakhs. And Pranay talks about new cities. And you know how long new cities are going to take, right? We don't have time. So how do you meet this challenge?
Correct. Actually, to start with, the ancillaries are actually working with startups and OEMs in terms of manufacturing for the EV charging components, which is your power modules and cables. Second, there is also the PLI scheme from the government, which helps in the manufacturing sector, and this helps reduce the costs of EVs by up to 25%. So the cost of ownership goes down, increasing the EV adoption, helping increase the EV adoption. And the third and the most important thing that that is being worked on is ancillary companies are working with the National Skill Development Corporation. There's going to be about 5 million jobs created in the EV charging space and the EV ecosystem by 2030.
Right, by 2030?
By 2030. So 2030.
How many million jobs?
5 million.
5 million.
Yeah, okay. Direct and indirect. So the ancillary companies are working with the NSDC to train and place the workforce into these positions. So yeah, definitely there is a gap, but there is also the push coming from the government to support the supply and demand side of it. Right. And there's also now people realize that it is not just EVs being cost efficient, but also a practical way to charge their EVs, right? So they'd like to charge wherever they are, and definitely also use the public charging infrastructure. So it's all about how ready the property is. When I say property, the house or the office, how EV ready is the property. It totally boils down to that.
Okay. Himanshu, when you speak of India as a market, right, we have a unique problem. I don't know whether it's a problem. It's a good thing, maybe. In the previous panel, we spoke of some bright spots for India, that the best interest that people are showing are from 2-tier, 3-tier, 4-tier cities or towards EV, especially in the 2-wheeler, 3-wheeler segments, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, it's a good problem to have. Now, but we also have a complex problem because when you look at the infrastructure, the charging points, right? Now, this is the first question that comes to your mind, right? And whoever has a 4-wheeler likes to drive, of course, unless it is within the city. So, what are the gaps that we face right now in terms of charging infrastructure?
Sure. So let's look at the lay of the land for a moment. Like in the entire EV ecosystem, I mean, I know I may not sound too profound when I say there is a V in EV, which is the vehicle itself.
Correct.
But the surrounding infrastructure, when we talk about it from the back stream and the front stream point of view, we've like to your question of the front end side of the infrastructure, I think there are various gaps in terms of, I'll give you an interesting statistic, like there are 27 cars per 1,000 people in India, right? If we compare it to US, they have 975 cars per 1,000 people. The infrastructure gaps that we're talking about is in terms of the EV market share within those 27 cars per 1,000 people. But I think we should look at it holistically because this number is also going to increase, even if it becomes 100 cars per 1,000 people. And broaden the spectrum of just infrastructure, right? There are 100 plus EV cars in India at this moment with just one charging point. If we compare it to some Nordic countries or even US, this isn't like low double digits, right? 10 to 15 cars per charging station, right? The first thing is that India's baseline is very low. If you talk about the adoption, it primarily comes from the 2-wheeler industry, the 3-wheeler industry, or the electric buses. But cars, we have a long way to go. The number that I think one of my co-panelists was also pointing towards was 30 lakhs, right? If the drive is coming from the tier 2, tier 3 cities, do the users get that confidence of taking their electric car from a 2-wheeler to a tier 1 city? I'm not sure that is the confidence that at least I have at this moment. But it has to be tied with the other infrastructure capex projects that the government is driving. Like retrofitting can go on, we cannot go in the past and change it, but at least whatever is being built, and even from the capex or infrastructure point of view, we have a long way to go, forget EVs for now. So it needs to be tied up with all the investments that are happening in the highways, the expressways, and the cities being built, or the IT parks being built. So I think EV needs to be the core attachment to every infrastructure investment that the government or the private sector is doing, or in terms of the PPP model. If it is at the core, then I think things would improve. Until then, we would only see a spike in adoption for 2-wheelers, 3-wheelers, which are primarily used for the last mile or intra-city travel.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, we had an interesting conversation before coming into this conversation about controlled EV travel, like you know exactly where you're going versus you know, just driving out of, let's say we're sitting in Noida, right? And you can take this question, Vaibhav. One of you were giving me that example of, you know, you would take a long drive with your EV, let's say Delhi to Mumbai, right? Or Delhi to I mean, on your major highways, but you wouldn't do the same when you're traveling from Noida to Lucknow, right? Now, how do you change that? In your view, and you track how infrastructure is built for, I mean, that's what you do, that's your area of expertise. Do you see that change over time?
So, you know, you rightly pointed out, the thing is that for major highways, the only pit stops that are there are petrol pumps,
correct,
right? Fuel stations.
Yes.
So what we are seeing change, you know, what we're seeing evolve in India as a whole is that the petrol pumps on highways, you know, all the major OMCs have their own versions of the highway petrol pumps. So they're converting them into mobility stations. Right, where you have like a proper pit stop like system where you'll have some restaurants, cafe, and you know maybe some resting area for truck drivers, right? Because you know that gives an opportunity for people, if they're charging their vehicle, they can sort of go around, spend close to an hour, right? When the vehicle is getting charged. So the companies are converting these conventional petrol pumps into a mobility station where they'll have petrol, diesel, CNG, electric. You know, even when hydrogen comes in, you'll have, you know, hydrogen dispense, you know, hydrogen cell set up
stations,
there, right? Stations there. We are also seeing that Reliance particularly has set up a lot of these charging stations. BP Pulse you'll see right across the country, and they've tied up with major charge point operators for this. So in terms of the discoverability aspect that you were talking about, we still have a long way to go. Not just for EVs, but for all greener alternatives. Even for CNG, I'll give you a number here. We have close to 7,000 CNG stations in India, as opposed to 88,000 petrol pumps in the country, right? We still have regions in the country where the penetration of CNG stations is not as high, right? EV, on the other hand, the infrastructure cost, the setup cost is much higher, right? So it'll also take a very long time to sort of get to base.
That reminds me of a point. I think Ford, which is one of the oldest automotive companies, has stopped calling itself an automotive company. It calls itself a mobility solutions provider. So even the automotive companies are widening the scope. Why does the government control the fuel stations? Because processing it is huge capex, and it is of strategic interest to any particular nation. So the government had a say there. But as far as electricity or charging stations are concerned, the government can only do as much, right? So these mobility solutions providers also, a part of the responsibility also falls to these mobility solution providers in terms of not just providing the vehicle, but also contributing in the infrastructure, which was not seen in the traditional IC vehicles.
So even to add to this, the problem is that most of the existing players in the EV charging space are building their own closed-off ecosystems, right? So if say you buy an EV car, like you're already contemplating one. So you get a car, you'll have to download 20, 30 different apps if you want to go to a charging station and actually operate that charger, right? So one good thing is that, the charging stations would soon be on the ONDC network, right? So you can use one app to operate any other charging station. You don't have to use, that particular entity's charging app. So I think that is a good way forward in this direction.
So, Saivir, if I can ask you this because you look at primarily charging stations, that's charging infrastructure is your area of expertise. Is there another complex problem that the EV industry faces in terms of having a universal charging system, right? You were explaining how the two-wheeler charging system is different from the entire four-wheel universe.
Yes. So four-wheelers, now we already have a standard. Like all different OEMs have the same charging standard when it comes to four-wheelers. It is also the case with two-wheelers. With last year, the government standardizing one particular standard for DC fast charging even for two-wheelers. So that's an interesting improvement in this space. And this will only help more charge point operators like me to set up these chargers that will also cater to all the two-wheelers available in the market. Right now, we just have a very basic solution for two-wheelers, which is largely being even three-wheelers. The same thing can also be used for four-wheelers, but again, it will take good 24 hours for a four-wheeler to charge with that sort of a system. This is an interesting development that was done last year.
On the ancillaries front, Pranay, we know how critical ancillaries are to the development of the EV infrastructure ecosystem, right? So where is India placed, and what are the challenges that you see from a planning perspective?
Ancillaries, EV, if you talk about that value chain entire, there are certain pockets in country where you find that entire automobile system is growing, developing. If you see, there is Chennai, that region, here in Gurgaon region, Pune region, or Jamshedpur region, there are the areas where you find that automobile company and the ancillaries they are developing. But EVs are not being produced allwhere. They are at fixed locations, and ancillaries are in the surrounding only, it is developing.
Right.
And I think you can add more on it.
Himanshu.
If we have to draw an analogy from the IC vehicles, right? Most of the automotive players, one of the automotive players globally used to own the land initially when the automotive industry started. Cultivate rubber, make parts from those rubbers, including tires, design the cars, own the land, cultivate rubber, then make the parts, then make the final vehicle and sell it. So they own the entire value chain, right? Now, 20, 30 years later, they realized that ancillaries can do this job a lot better.
Yeah.
I am in the business of designing a vehicle, doing the R&D and innovating on the vehicles, right? So ancillaries emerged in the IC era also, and it took good 5-6 decades. If I pick the example of India, I think till the late 70s and early 80s, there were just 2 companies that used to manufacture bolts. I'm talking of a very small part that goes into a vehicle. But it all changed as soon as the liberalization happened. A lot of brands came in, it scaled up as well. A similar trajectory can also be seen with the EV landscape in India, right? There are more than 20,000 plus ancillaries catering to the IC vehicles right now. But less than 5% of these ancillaries are ready for the EV revolution. If you look at the bigger players, they have invested in the bigger tier ones, so as to speak, the suppliers, the ancillaries. They have made good investments towards it, but a large part of it still remains untouched because the R&D budgets for these smaller scale suppliers are relatively lower. It is the responsibility of the OEMs to invest in the R&D part of it as well. So I would still call it a very, very nascent phase, because most of the discussions that we said, like I said, EV, there is a vehicle around which the entire charging backend and the front end operates. Even if you focus on the vehicle, the R&D part of it, the innovation part of it, the front end in terms of the charging infrastructure, the longest time that it is going to take is to build the back-end infrastructure, which is the ancillaries, right? Having said that, in the last couple of years, because of the FAME and the recent PM e-Drive initiative, that is promoting localization. The PLI scheme that is offering a lot of subsidies and incentives to these ancillaries and manufacturers, they are still coming up, but I think it's still, I think, in terms of the import localization or the dependency on the domestic ancillaries, we are still at least a decade away from reaching that stage. If you look at the IC vehicles, we've attained 90% localization in the tractor industry, in the agricultural equipment industry. In a two-wheeler, 90% of the components are manufactured domestically.
Correct.
Even after like 6-7 decades. So for EV, we are a good decade away, but I think these schemes will promote ancillaries to invest more.
So let me put it this way. How much are we dependent on China?
I think substantially in terms of the battery tech, but companies are still trying to build indigenous technologies, but it'll still take, as you mentioned, more than a decade to match that level of quality.
Okay. Why is there a disparity? I mean, we were discussing it, a disparity between the infra in, let's say, you're from AP Telangana region, right? You operate mostly there, and in like in Maharashtra. And then, do you see that southern, western regions are more adaptable, ready for EV compared to the rest? Do you see that as is that perception for real?
It's not a perception, it's a reality. See, wherever people adopt the EV vehicle first, it goes hand in hand. Naturally, that entrepreneur will tap those regions first to provide that infrastructure. Like IT industry, wherever they were there, and particularly in, say, Bangalore, they started buying EV for their local travel, intracity travel. Naturally, they needed this. They first kept thing in their residence. Weekend, they wanted to travel. Entrepreneur spotted this opportunity. And rightfully, they provided it along the route they wanted to travel during the weekend.
Yes.
And that facility emerged. In fact, if you look to the different strategy, what people are adopting, I was, making a study, being a consultant, we were making a study, what type of strategies people are formulating.
Yeah.
There are different strategies. If you look to manufacturer versus battery, what you call charging solution provider, there is a strategy coming. There is a strategy emerging between manufacturer and old conventional fuel charging station, which is becoming now energy charging station. There is a a strategy coming between government focus, then there is a technology provider. Some examples are there. Like a static, if you look to, there is a solution provider. They are tying up with all variety. They are tying up with HPCL, BPCL, and then they are providing. Why BPCL is tying up with them? They want to become more stability related. As a result, they want to go to 7,000 outlets they want to convert to energy charging. Means they will become mixed.
Yeah.
So is the case, people are going like MG Motors, they are manufactured. So is the case Tata Motors, they are manufactured. They are going to some solution provider and providing
Okay. Yeah.
some solution. Like MG is providing with, I think, BP Geo, one solution. They are trying to take it.
Actually, MG just launched their eHub app, and all the trusted CPOs are on that platform, where all the MG users can navigate to different operators. It is not just Lion Charge or anybody else, but they have the entire pool of the chargers. Like you said, right? It's all there's a disparity in terms of location as well.
Yes.
So MG got everybody together. Similarly with Tata as well. So now OEM themselves are bringing up their own aggregator apps, and this is helping them drive their sales and build confidence in their own customers.
I think this has to do with the whole connected car experience, right? So when you have the infotainment system,
Correct.
you also have the app that powers it. So all these OEMs have an app that they give once you sort of buy a vehicle from them. So
it's like through that app you can also book your service. So everything related to the car is available on that app. Also charging comes under that.
Yeah. And what are the challenges you face with this connected ecosystem? I mean, is it practical? Is it
No, it's actually good. It helps increase reliability with the customer, and also for the charge point operator, it helps drive traffic. Right? We want utilization. That will encourage us to add more stations, and that will help people buy more vehicles. So it's a vicious cycle once you start it.
Yeah.
But if you remove the software aspect from a car or a vehicle, it would not even be 10% of an experience that you have. You think of players like Google and Uber making driverless cars. These are not even automotive companies. So a car has become more software than metal right now. And if you remove this connected experience, I don't think the experience right now of owning or driving a car would be even 10% of what we experience right now.
And also, you would have all these OBD players, coming in just to know where the vehicle is. So once you have this whole connected car experience, all these newer variants will have it, right?
Yeah.
So the benefit is that you don't have to have a separate OBD device that you insert into the vehicle.
The 2 points which I wanted to add. One is Google tying up with electric pay to give a person which range, what charging facilities existing, the nearest me and all. And interoperability between 2 players, like Static is also entering with tie-up with some other. So if their vehicle moves to some other region, they need not have to again download another app.
That will happen through ONDC.
Yeah, ONDC will be the largest platform.
If ONDC happens, then
that will
naturally.
most definitely happen. Like we saw some pilots with the food delivery apps earlier this year. Right? That will happen.
they're running that pilot in Bangalore.
Himanshu, how do government policies affect the ability to implement these infra projects on the policy front, right? The government has a vision, and that vision is to have 30%, I think, if I'm not wrong, 30%,
2030.
right, EV coverage by 2030.
Yes.
Yeah, that is in annual sales.
In annual sales. Do you think they can get there? What are the challenges in your view on the policy front?
Right. I think in terms of on the policy front in the last half a decade, I think we've seen major action. FAME 1 and FAME 2 have been the primary drivers of EV adoption from the consumer point of view. Right. Now, I think a couple of days back, I think the central government notified of the PM e-drive scheme, which is a little more holistic in terms of including a lot of push for the EV adoption from the consumer point of view. Also in terms of the charging infrastructure, I think there is an outlay of 2,000 crores, if I'm not mistaken, that's allocated only for the developing the charging infrastructure. And
is that enough? 2,000 crores? Is that enough?
It's a good start. 2000.
This is largely focused on highway charging, right? Largely focused on highway charging for intercity commute. Okay. Right, everybody who owns an EV right now is able to drive only within the city.
Yes.
From home to office, office to home. or just another 30 kilometers, but not
No, absolutely.
not drive to another city like we were just talking about Noida to Lucknow.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in India, like if you look at again the point that we were discussing, 30% in annual sales, I think two-wheelers and three-wheelers may help us get there.
Three-wheelers have got, I mean, have
More
already
than
taken us
50%,
beyond that,
60% market share
Yeah.
of all the three-wheelers being sold, it comes from the L3 and the L5 variants, like the electric vehicles.
Yeah.
So three-wheelers maybe will reach there sooner, but if we have to look at it holistically, 30% of the entire sales, we should aim to sell 30% electric cars out of every 100 cars being sold. For that, I think a huge investment is also required. I think a lot of incentive programs should continue at least for the next good part of the next decade, if we ever hope to reach there.
Yeah.
Again, my point.
Why you don't sound very optimistic?
Because we understand.
No, that's why I'm asking. Let's have a frank conversation. I mean, you don't have to be diplomatic about
I wanted
it.
to add there.
Real issues.
And I wanted to add there in terms of numbers. See, typically 80%, he was confirming just before this conference started. 80% is either domestic or that commercial where you are putting your vehicle in that office.
Yeah.
20% is what you otherwise need for the public.
Yes.
So 30 lakh out of which you need 20%. That means 6 lakhs what you need for the public charging.
Yeah.
For the public charging, that the typical facility will charge minimum 35 lakhs for if you are putting one charging station. If you are putting 4, around 1 crore is what you are spending. Now 1 crore, that means you are covering 3-4. And in case you are wanting to reach that number, around 2 lakh crore would be required that investment.
2 lakh crore.
Yes.
And there's an outlay of 2,000 crore right now.
It is a government investment.
I understand that.
Entrepreneurs have to bring the balance.
You look at the Japanese car companies.
Yeah.
I mean, how many car EV models can you name from a Japanese car manufacturer? We'll struggle to name even one.
Yeah.
Hybrid technology has existed for the last good 2.5 decades now, right? Why are these car companies a little reluctant to come up with a lot of new EV models, right? Even you look at the last 6 months, you would have 10 new variants being launched in the IC segment, right? So car manufacturers are also shying away a little bit in terms of the push, in terms of coming out with new models, only because of a lack of infrastructure in the country, right? Now, as I said, I feel as compared to the petrol and the diesel fueled vehicles, wherein the government had a majority of the work to do, here I think it needs to be a distributed ownership in terms of who takes the onus of setting it up. We are a lot more technology driven than we were 50 years back.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of startups like the people sitting in the room, along with these mobility solutions providers or the automotive companies, have to take the lead. Let's say a decade back, who would have thought an MG or an Audi or a Mahindra would tie up with startups to focus on the charging infrastructure, right? Because in IC, everybody looked up to the government. The government would have the likes of BPCL, HPCL set up fuel station. Here, the car companies are also taking ownership. So I think that distributed ownership is required in the form of subsidies, in the form of legislations also, because you're not just selling an electric vehicle. In order to sell more, what infrastructure do you need? The car company should also look at it and invest along with the government.
But are Indian EV startups equipped to push in that amount of capital on the charging
not right
infrastructure?
It's all about innovation, right? Definitely, people are ready to invest in this space, right? This is only a growing market and at a very fast rate, right? It's all about innovation, right? What problem you're solving and how quickly you're able to address.
Are there any regulatory hurdles?
No, actually, to start off, especially the EV charging part is a delicensed business, right? So that gave a lot of push to many operators to come into the picture, right? The most important thing is also it's not about just picking up capital and setting up infrastructure, but also ensuring that they are running, right? They're in operational condition. That is the most important thing that is required. And whatever innovation that can be done in that space, making use of IoT devices or ensuring there's enough surveillance around the charger as well, because there's a lot of vandalization also that happens in a public domain space. But that's not the case with charging within the society or in your office, right?
Yes.
So these are more safer places to charge while you're working. Yes, that's one of the reasons why they don't allow outsiders also to come inside and charge, citing security.
Even in case of a public charging setup, we'll have to focus on both the O&M part of it and even the utilization aspect. Because you're mentioning that the auto manufacturers, OEMs are not really coming up with new models. We were discussing.
Is there any challenge that you face in scaling up, especially on the charging front?
Yeah, I have got one thought on it. One area which has been overlooked is when you start charging, it starts drawing electricity. When you start charging a large number, naturally if you know that back EMF comes, that level of grid pressure has not yet faced. India has not seen that type of how to manage the grid like that. Smart grid has to be developed, and that development is still pending. In case today, if you give 20% charging facility in a society, society and the entire background grid has not been developed like this. If 20% people start charging together,
Then
how will that grid behave? People have not worked out on it. It may collapse.
To add to that, actually, in fact, counter to that, now you have smart systems, right? When we know like 20 cars are trying to charge, like you said, right? The apartment is not ready. But with smart load management, your system identifies that, okay, now all 20 cars are trying to charge, but we don't have that load. So it automatically underpowers these chargers. But at the same time, dependency on the grid is very much there, right? Only technology is
But that what
helping.
you are talking about is possible within a society.
Yeah,
I'm talking about in a region.
correct. I'm only talking about a microgrid.
Because dynamic load balancing and those things do come in play, and a smart grid has to be handled. Otherwise, there is a possibility of suddenly people finding not able to charge.
Yeah, and Himanshu, I mean, because you work with a lot of these OEMs, right, and different stakeholders, how do you see all of them collaborate? Of course, you are part of a platform that helps people link to each other and collaborate. But how do you see in the EV segment stakeholders coming together, strengthen the ancillaries and the infra ecosystem further?
Sure. I think, like I said, the pressure is truly coming from the likes of Google and Uber. They are not automotive companies, but they're technology companies, and they're pushing the automotive companies. What that tells us is the true USP of an automotive OEM is not manufacturing, right? Its true USP is R&D, designing and innovation. That is the true USP. And that is what they're good at. What differentiates a Honda and a Volkswagen? It's all, the parts are virtually the same, right, in terms of the nomenclature. It's the design, the R&D. Now, auto ancillaries are manufacturing experts. Their USP is manufacturing. And that is where companies like us also play in, not just in terms of taking complete ownership of the supply chain and manufacturing, but also in terms of the value addition to the auto ancillaries. Like I said, of course, if you look at the automotive OEMs, you have like good R&D teams, big budgets. But if you look at the auto ancillaries, the R&D spending is pretty low, right? So there is a room for players like us, like CapGrid and certain other players, for value engineering, working with auto ancillaries and OEMs, and adding value, creating value for the auto OEMs, working with auto ancillaries, right? I'll give you a very small example. Like I think the government, under phased manufacturing scheme, mandated, I think, a certain percentage of localization in the EV chargers. I was surprised. A small screw was being sourced from China.
Oh my God.
Even a small screw that we had to develop or localize in India. We were working with a charger manufacturer, and you would be surprised again that the design the Chinese component had was pretty much cannot be manufactured in India unless a huge investment was made for a very small screw. So we created a particular design, gave it to the auto ancillary, got it developed, and then standardized it across a couple of other players too. So I think the auto ancillaries are willing to walk that extra mile. It's just that the hand-holding or the R&D or the know-hows need to be transferred. So OEMs, players like us have a larger responsibility for bringing the ancillaries to that level. Like I said, there were only 2 bolt manufacturers till the 1980s.
Right.
Once India saw that scale, automotive OEMs like the likes of Maruti, Tata Motors worked a lot, Ashok Leyland worked a lot with these auto ancillaries, made investments to bring them to that level, right? A similar story needs to be written again. If we have to reach there in a decade's time and not take 2 or 3 decades. So a lot of hand-holding investment in terms of R&D and value addition needs to be done at the ancillary level.
Ancillary level. Okay, at the end of this, I'll give you 30 seconds each. If you can just, from a policy perspective or a government initiative perspective, if you think something is going to be a game changer, I'd like to hear from you.
The new PM e-drive scheme, which has just been rolled out, is really good for the EV ecosystem as a whole, supporting both the supply side and the demand side of it, and especially even the focus on establishing the charging infrastructure, largely focused on intercity commute and powering buses, heavy vehicles. So they're looking to set up these, in a PPP model, looking to set it up.
I know you're happy, but you want something more. Is what is my question.
No, actually, we take baby steps, right?
Okay.
That's how it starts.
No, but I'm asking you for a game changer. What do you, if I had to ask you, is there a game changer that you are looking for?
I really think we need more. We need to add more charges, right? That push is coming from the government, and now looking at the investment that the government is making, there will be private entities also willing to jump in and set up more. So this is just a catalyst.
Okay, Pranay.
Government has done enough in terms of providing incentive to manufacture more. In charging space, that support is required, and as I told you, on the area where individuals can't do it, it has to be done at the grid level. That effort is required. And also on terms of compliance side, where like 20% charging facility, what they are talking about, it has to be enforced.
Has to be enforced.
Because well, it is there on paper, but at times we find that people are not really adhering to it. And then creating awareness. Government has done so through universities and colleges. But you know that EV, while we talk and sit and talk about it in NCR region, but tier 2, tier 3 cities and others, still there is lots of gaps in understanding how this entire ecosystem operates.
Himanshu?
I think we need to go top down here. If we aim to have 30% of EV market share by 2030, we need to focus both on the supply side and the demand side. If our policies are designed to push just the demand, the supply will suffer, and I think it would the affordability part of it would go out of the window. So I think a lot of investment, while a lot of investment has been made on the demand side to push the demand side, I don't see a lot of investments apart from the PLI scheme to bring the tier 2, the smaller ancillaries, to encourage them more to participate in this EV revolution. So I think that is one thing that I would want to see a lot more in the next 5-6 years by 2030, while we continue to push on the demand side of things.
Okay. Vaibhav?
So, I can only talk about the fuel discovery aspect here.
Go on.
So, the point is that in terms of the ONDC step, having all the charge point operators ensure that, the charging points are listed on the ONDC network. Small pilots are being done, but I would love to see it happen more aggressively across the country.
But why is it in a country like ours, which has the technology know-how, the talent, the mind, the brains, why can't we push this platform? I mean, why is it taking so long?
Takes time, you have to convince everyone, like even for the initial pilots that happened for the food delivery apps, not a lot of them participate.
Is there a resistance?
It depends from a CPO to CPO on how they view it. And some CPOs actually look at it from the perspective of driving utilization. Right, that is more important, no matter from where it is coming. Right, if from my app or the other app for me, I am more focused on keeping my charger warmed up.
I
But
think
on the other
marketing,
side, people would want
marketing
the
and
loyalty
promotion.
aspect, right?
Got it.
They would want that my users stick to my network.
platform.
Yeah.
Got it.
But I think standardization does take time.
Of course.
Earlier, if you look at all the automotive manufacturers, they would manufacture everything in-house. So they would be making the same part, but 10 manufacturers would have 10 different setups for doing it. Eventually, they realized one auto supplier can supply the same part to all the 10 manufacturers, right?
Yeah.
So that standardization does take time. In a nascent industry like the EV industry, I think people will try to experiment and find their own course until things channel down to and narrow down towards one approach. So I think that would take time, but that would be quicker than a lot of other things that we anticipate.
Considering that it is all a lot of people are there in the sector because it is not a licensed business. It will be very difficult to have everyone come on the same table.
It's all about, like I said, right, keeping the chargers operational as well. That is also an important aspect.
Very interesting conversation. I mean, I've learned so much from this conversation. Thank you for being a part of it. Savir, Pranay, Himanshu and Vaibhav, thank you for being with us on the second roundtable. Thank you very much.
Joining us today, and of course the insightful discussions that we've had. In fact, Republic Digital Roundtable, Mobility Revolution, pioneering the next auto era, has brought together brilliant minds and passionate voices, creating a collective vision for the future of India's automotive landscape. We look forward to the impact that today's discussions will have, and of course to reconvening soon to continue this vital journey towards a mobility revolution. Thank you.